Welcome to TAD, the Autonomous Dealership podcast presented to you by 360 Auto AI.
Hey, welcome to the new episode of TAD, the Autonomous Dealer. And I'm Ron Scorado here at 360 Auto AI with Albert Thompson, the founder of ID Privacy, who is the backbone of our organization and is the one who came up with the idea for this type of agentic AI that we're going to talk about today. And our main focus is going to be on what AI can do for your dealership, in particular, what this AI can do for your dealership, and how it can solve your pain points, how it can solve your problems, what kind of expectations you might have from comparing one AI versus the other. And basically, what we're going to show you is why this AI is different from any other thing you'll see out on the market. Um, and Albert, I think I want to start it off by kind of explaining the multiple types of AI that there are out there, starting with machine learning, then on to generative, agentic, and autonomous. I think the typical dealer is somewhat confused about AI. They've seen some things, they've heard some things. Basically, until you who sounds beautiful, sounds great, very friendly, conversant, but very limited in the task because the agent is hooked up to an automation. It's hooked up to a machine learning task. And it sounds great, it delivers that task, but it stops there. So now let's talk about what our whole podcast is about and what our whole operations are here with us as a sales agent for 360 Auto, for ID Privacy, as autonomous AI is taking that agent and doing what? You tell me, what does the autonomous nature of this offering do to help a car dealership?
Yeah. And I think before we answer that, right, I think I want to go back to what you were just saying a minute ago, which is there's a lot of, like I said, there's a lot of noise in the market, a lot of people talking about different types of systems out there, and you nailed it, by the way. If you actually look at the early 2000s to the mid 2015s, you did. You had a limited script based technology, and it was very limited robotic style, and then ultimately 2015 to 2022, 2023. You started to see, advancements into conversational, but again, really based rule process automations, right? RPA based automations, and then ultimately, the advancement into the agentic era, right? And this is why Auto 360 ID privacy is very, very different, right? Because what's in the market today, I basically say there's two camps, and there's probably more. There's probably a lot of in between. And again, I always try to say this in not a way to like say one's better than the other, but ultimately there is one better in terms of capabilities and technical advancements and what it's capable of doing. But depending on what it's built for, right? There's wrappers, and then there's real infrastructure and real agentic and autonomous AI. Okay, so there's um, a lot of what I call companies that are whitewashing AI. They slap a UI wrapper on top of a GPT, and they call it an AI platform. And dealerships buy it thinking it's built for purpose AI, when in reality, they're just paying for API calls. It's very, very important to make this distinction, right? Because there's no dealership data control. That's number one, super important. There's no differentiation. Every AI vendor is going to essentially be reselling the exact same thing, right? There's no depth into the technology. They can't handle the workflows. They can't adjust those workflows. They can't set up different types of multi-agent orchestrations because they don't have any layers. All right, and AI, the way it's built today, is you have to have your infrastructure. You got to be able to have these layers that are built on top of each other to really have an end-to-end AI infrastructure. And that leads me to the second, camp, which is the camp of Auto 360 and ID privacy, right? Where we've essentially, we're not a wrapper, right? We're not whitewashing. We've spent the greater part of almost 2 years now building an actual complete private AI stack where the dealerships would actually own their own knowledge bases, where all the fine tuning would be secure and private and an encrypted environment. All the outputs remain inside of that encrypted environment, right? Where we have a translation layer to bring in all of the dealership systems, whether that's the DMS, whether that's the CRM, whether that's multiple API calls from different types of systems. That gives you the ability to have your own knowledge bases, which we built our own knowledge bases, so that we can really truly custom fine tune the models specifically based on those dealerships. And that really is the distinction and the main difference between what you would call a wrapper today and true agentic AI, because you really have to have the ability to have the machine learn and work and reason. It has to be able to reason what it's doing, and it has to be able to The dealers are getting that feeling of like, oh, this AI has let me down. I've tried this company, it let me down. I tried this company, it couldn't do it. They said I needed to do. And the reason why, it goes back to that stack. It goes back to the fact that you don't have that infrastructure. And let me tell you some of those requests that we get, because this is important. Um, Dealers want to know, can on a call, can she actually look up the previous call visit? Can the AI actually look and say, hey, Ron, are you a new and existing customer? I found your file. I noticed you're driving a 2020 Honda Accord. By the way, on your last visit, we changed your oil and we rotated the tires. But I see that you declined the brake job. And you're also due for your 20K mile service, cabin filter and fluids. Would you like me to add those in today? If the customer says yes, the AI can actually roll forward the client brake RO codes in today's ticket, checks ATM, X-Time APIs for available slots, book the appointment, send the confirmation, and then actually continue to follow that up. And why that's different than, say, the shallow, I call it shallow because there's really no depth to the wrapper, so to speak. Why that's different is because it's proactive. So it's not just reactive. And by the way, we should talk about that a little bit later in the podcast. Agentic and autonomous versus just conversational. Again, it comes down to two things: a proactive agent versus a reactive agent. And an autonomous agent needs to be proactive. It has to be able to anticipate the need, not just the reactive booking, right? It has to have cross-system orchestrations, which means it needs to look into Xtime, it needs to look into CRM, it needs to look into the DMS. All of these things need to converge together in an intersection in real time. And then the agent needs to think, literally think about, oh, I see here, you did decline that brake service. We should mention that. And we should talk about how we can bring that forward. Now, this is some of the stuff that we're rolling out right now. And this is going to be in our next phase version of agents that is coming down. The fact that we can actually version out agents, again, differentiation.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's come to my attention that there are certain facets of this that they're not aware of in a service fix op environment, right? It is what happens when 5 people call at once. Well, guess what? They don't know that we can answer all 5 calls simultaneously and book all 5 appointments simultaneously. They're
Yeah,
not used to that. They're used to busy
no,
signals and hangups and things of that nature. That never happens, right? 100
yeah,
calls come in, 100 calls are answered. And that's the beauty of this. I think what was the stat from one of the dealers last month, 73% of all inbound calls that came into the service department were booked to an appointment with 0 human interaction. That's pretty
yep,
amazing. But the
yeah,
other end of that is if the dealer wants there to be some human interaction, it's easy for the AI agent to hand off to whoever you want, whether it's going to a main switchboard or going to somewhere else in the service department. They will roll that over if the agent is requested by the customer. With the beauty that I love about it is the information base is incredible. The
yeah,
agent seems to know everything. You know, we call the agent all the time and try to trip the agent up, right? And so, yes, Mandy or whatever your name is, I would love to book an oil change and a tire rotation. But then what happens when a customer says, you know, you get an elderly lady calls in and says, I've got this knocking noise under my hood and I don't know what it is. And the agent rattles off 2 or 3 things that it could be, and then
yeah,
on top of just booking an oil change and a tire rotation, says, "Well, ma'am, while you've got that rattle, please make sure it doesn't get worse. Pull over if it does. But in the meantime, why don't we have our service department check that out for you while you're here? Would you like me to put that in your notes so that someone looks into that noise while you're here?" And the agent is being proactive, discovering that there is a problem and offering a solution, which is often an upsell. the time. But there's also a lot of people out there that just want their problems taken care of or their questions answered. And face it, the typical, rep at a dealership isn't as versed in everything that there is to know. I think in particular, and that'll bring me to the next point, is let's talk about the sales applications of the agent. Um,
Mhm.
this agent knows everything about every vehicle on your lot. And when I say everything, you want to compare this model to that model? Great. The agent is going to illustrate the differences. If you ask it, what's the price of this model versus that model? It's going to tell you. Or half the time, your salespeople say, well, you'll have to come in and we'll tell you then, right? And they
Mhm.
won't release the information. But if we have that programmed into the workflow to give the answer that the agent wants, the customer is going to get the information they need. If they ask it about safety, we've got
Yep.
the National Highway Traffic and Safety Institute tied in as a knowledge base so that it's going to tell you everything about the crash ratings on that vehicle. If
Yep.
you want to know about mileage, the EPA estimated mileage for one vehicle versus another, it'll give you that comparison. Whereas your typical salesperson might take 10 minutes with that person on the line to try to look it up and call up one car and call up another and see if they can find a trusted source for that. We already have the trusted source. It's your website, Mr. Dealer, and your source, your website, every VDP page has everything about that car, and our agent knows it all and
Yeah.
instantly. And that's what's unique about this is those answers that could be provided, right? Um,
Yeah. Absolutely. And I
talk.
call that, Ron. So,
What's that?
no, I was gonna say, and Ron, I call that really the agentic edge, right? Because I think when we talked earlier about the difference between essentially, and again, a rapper is essentially is a chatbot, right? It's a voice chatbot, and I don't say that in a negative way, but it is what it is, right? And if you talk about what we're discussing here, you're everything you're saying is spot on. It's the agentic edge, right? It's the difference between the chatbots that are essentially with a voice layer on top of it, as opposed to a real agentic AI that can help dealers sell, that can help dealers increase ROs and fixed ops. And some of the things that you were saying were spot on. And from an agent perspective, one of the things you asked a little earlier, and I just want to touch on it, was like, what are some of the things that the dealers could ask, right? Or what are some of the things they could do to help uncover, you know, um, is this a true agentic AI, or is this something that is going to be a wrapper that's going to be essentially just a bolt-on tool to my business? And you got to think about it from that perspective. It's like pulling one tool off the shelf and then pulling another tool off the shelf. Um, the challenge with that is ultimately operationally, it's not going to work. You're not going to have scalability. You're not going to be able to run multiple agents from this tool and that tool and then put it all together. Even if one says, hey, I can do service, and another one says I can do sales. Well, what if you want to have a parts agent? What if one day you want to have an F&I agent? Are they going to be able to have contextual handoffs between each other? Rappers can't do that. Agentic systems can, right? Can the AI be context aware, journey aware, channel aware all at once and keep memory across all of those channels? Chatbots can't, Agentic can. So I always tell dealers, like, look, very simple questions you can always ask, right? If a customer replies by text and they're talking to me by text, and let's say, for example, they decide they want to switch and call me on the phone, is the agent going to know me? And then let's say they get off the phone and they come back and then they email me. Is the agent going to remember the text, the phone, and the email conversation? If not, it's fragmented. It's not a true agentic AI infrastructure, because true agentic AI is built do my analysis of the call, right? Sure, right? And there's times where even in our scenario, we might use a better model, right? To do those things that might use that same exact pipeline. But when it comes to the core business data for privacy, you need to make sure 100% that your vendors can tell you that it's going to stay in that secure environment, because you can't risk your data. And it's not going to be from the point where your data is threatened on your end. It's going to be threatened from the other side, right? When somebody can learn how to prompt inject your agent, and then when that data is going back and forth, it's going to be able to then take it and then be able to do whatever they want to do with it. And there's real things out there, Ron. I'll give you an example. From a voice perspective, there's people can Google this. There's like, I think, what's called a dolphin attack, where they can actually play a sound through the voice, and then that can actually go into the prompt. And if it's not secured, it'll ultimately make it into your systems and then start taking your data. And that's a real risk when you're thinking about people's licenses, credit cards, and all of those things. And that's ultimately going to be on the dealer.
Well, that like I said, from when we're talking on the upper level, my typical service director isn't concerned about that, but definitely the
Nope.
general manager, and without a doubt the owner is, right? Because the fines are incredible for what happens when you're sacrificing PII for your customers. They want to know that
Yep.
they're secure, and we know that we won't cross the line anywhere. And really, with the guardrails that are put on this autonomous system, when people hear it, they're blown away, right? The kinds of answers and the kind of questions that the agent asks the customer are just incredible. And the fact that no matter what it is, there are guardrails built on this agent. So even when you get the most bizarre questions or a risque question, she reels it back in and uses a classy way to hone it down, acknowledge the speaker or the customer, and bring it back and wrap it back to the automotive conversation, which is just blows me away that
Right.
it can do that. And for me, hearing is believing, because you've never
Yes.
I've been thinking about this all the time, and it's like anybody that hears one of our agents says, I've never heard anything like that before. Or I've
Wow.
heard something similar, but this is way different, right?
Yeah.
So the the uniqueness. But now let's talk about the maybe the pain points. I won't even call it a pain point. I'll call it about the requests from dealers when you're hooking up a system or doing the initial integrations. And some say, well, why is there such a high onboarding fee or something like that? It's not that it's that high, but it's that arduous of a task to set this agent up correctly from the beginning and in a unique way that works with the workflow of that dealership, so that the people on the back end at the dealership don't notice a difference from the standpoint of how they interact with their notes, with what's in X time, with what's in their CRM, and how they see this agent's interactions with their customers. um, that is a differentiating factor here that I think, dealers have asked me, how do I see what this is doing? And it's kind of like having a call review or a car wars, right? Somebody who
Yeah.
answers the phones and you're listening to those things. Well, here, I don't know how many times I've heard agents say, or not agents, GMs say, "Oh my God, I just went into the phone tree and just started listening to some of the recorded voice messages, and I want to shoot myself," right? Because
Ooh.
they've
Yeah.
heard the interactions that their customers have with their sales agents, and they're just appalled, right? And there's so
Yeah.
much turnover in the business, so many newbies coming in. We're constantly training
an inbound lead, customer calls in. What is the first thing that's going to happen if somebody's calling from a dealership, right? That call is structured in, what are you looking at? Is there a vehicle that you're interested in? Do you have a stock number? Do you have a VIN number? And your agent would need to be able to know those things, land on a vehicle of interest, be able to answer specific questions about that vehicle, be able to land them on that, ask discovery-based questions, and in the typical road to the sale, right? The agents that we build are built on the road to the sale. And then of course there's fine tuning from that based on each individual dealership. But you can't use that same exact agentic agent for outbound, because if, let's say, that same phone number, gets a call back, is that customer who's now landed on a car, submitted a lead, or asked questions, is in your CRM, and then they call back in because maybe you take it one step further. They came into the dealership, they test drove the car with Tom, now they know Tom, and they went back home and they say, well, think about it. They call back into that agent. Agent's gonna answer the phone. Hi there. Have you landed on a car? Are you interested in a particular vehicle? You're putting the customer back into a loop. So you've got to stop and think about this stuff, right? It's the last mile, the last half mile of AI that's the hardest. And here's the kicker. That outbound agent has to be able to then be a totally different context and know that if you call back in, it's got to know you. Hey, Ron, this is XYZ Mandy agent. I see that you're calling back. Are you responding back on the 2024 Nissan Aria that we test drove yesterday? That has to be the conversation, right? So your inbound's got to be different than your outbound. It's got to be completely different, and it's got to keep that context and persistent memory that we're talking about. And this is where the shallow agents that we talked about earlier, the wrappers, that's where they can't do that, right? Because this is where it gets very, very hard for them to keep all of this together. So I just wanted to make sure I touched on that. And from an AI perspective, the metric that you're really looking for is time to first value. So when you onboard your customers and you're a dealership, what you really should be looking for is how soon can I start to really see that first value that the AI brings? And I think you nailed it on the head. Within the first 5 minutes, they're gonna start seeing that value.
Yep. Let's talk about the human in the loop part of this, because that is a concern for some people, is knowing that the agent doesn't hijack every call, if you will, but knows when to trade it off. And on the other side of that, let's just talk about a sales agent. I think one of the unique things is the way that our agents analyze a call or a text conversation, right? And what do they do next? Explain that process that someone has just submitted a lead online. The agent within 2 minutes is already conversing back to that customer, literally immediately, with a response, right? Take me through that process.
Yeah. So here's the process, right? And here's how it'll play out. Customer hits your website, and let's even take it one step further. Customer hits your website at midnight, asking about a Jeep Wrangler. And let's say they call or they text, right? Doesn't matter. Or they submit a lead. Our agent doesn't just say someone will call you tomorrow, right? It's going to check your live inventory. It's going to pull VIN specific details. It's going to text, back and forth. And by the way, countless stories, too many to list, of people actually buying cars at 11, 12, 1, 2 in the morning. It's just unbelievable. So the customer is going to get a message. Do you want to see payment options? Do you want to book a test drive, right? That agent is going to have that conversation right then and there, right? To really work to book the appointment. And if they want to book the appointment, it's going to book the appointment in CRM. Now imagine all of a sudden a salesperson, wakes up the next morning, sees the notes in the CRM, and the agent's already taken it down funnel, and they're now getting the appointment in there. And then let's say, for example, from that perspective, what I think you're referring to is what we call our observation layer. have to be customizations around the voice. There's going to have to be QA. You're going to have to understand exactly what that workflow in your dealership looks like, right? You wouldn't just hand the keys to a new hire and say, "Hey, good luck." No, you're going to have to build this. We're going to have to onboard them. And speaking of that, and this is something we should talk about, is that once the agent goes live, there's still a learning period after that, right? Because, again, going back to the new hire scenario, you wouldn't just hire a person on your BDC phone and say, "Good luck, start making calls." And no, you have to onboard them. You have to train them. You have to
You have
plug
to
them
train
into
them
your
in your
systems.
processes too, right? So it's
That's
not
right.
just train them, but train them in your processes. And I think that's great because that's exactly what this does is what our people do, right?
Yep.
Is we get in there and get into the nitty gritty, find out how they operate. We tell them what a best practice is as well. So we
Yep.
may uncover something in their process that doesn't work right now. And there's a lot of
Yeah.
that happening, right? And now what are we doing? We're kind of fixing that problem that they didn't even think about. And now we bring it to their attention and the agent can fix it after the agent is programmed. And I kind of think I look back and I think it's kind of like going into a fast food joint versus sitting in a gourmet restaurant. You don't walk into a gourmet restaurant and say, "I want a porterhouse steak," and it comes out in 2 minutes. It doesn't happen that way, right?
That's a good point.
If it
Yeah.
does, you go to fast food, okay, and you get what you get when you expect that. So if you're getting
Mhm.
somebody who's going to turn you on in a day or in a week, there's
Right.
obviously a reason they can do that because they're not going in depth. They're not giving you a full autonomous solution. They're
That's
not
right.
giving you the right integrations with the tools that you have from your DMS to your service scheduler to your CRM and everything in between, Black Book, vAuto, any other integration that this dealer wants, where the agent has a source to rely on and can convey the information that that customer or that dealership is looking for. You don't get that in a quick turnaround because
Yep.
obviously there's no time there. It's the kid who goes and takes the tests. That's a 3 hour test and just checks all the A boxes and says, "I'm going to get at least 25% of these tests right," and throws it in and walks out the door. Right? This is not like
Yep.
that, and we believe, and that's what I like about the organization is we believe in making sure that it's right from the start, but there are
Yep.
always things that it's going to learn. And you put it the I think the most plainly for me and for anybody else, I use the analogy all the time when we talk to dealers, is the day that we install the agent, it's an infant. By the end of the first month, it's graduated from high school. And by the end of the second month, it's probably got a PhD because it's learning and absorbing from the marketplace, from your customers,
Hmm.
from the way
Hmm.
they come in and interact with the agent. The agent learns that and reacts like that. And it becomes part of that growing knowledge base of the agent, not only of what the source of information is, but what the source of the people calling in is and how to adjust to that. And I think that's what's so unique about this. Now, another
Yep.
thing that I get from dealers is, tell me about, can I make this agent sound like a man? Can I make it, sound older or younger? What's your
Hmm.
answer to that?
No, I mean absolutely, and there's plenty of voice layers out there, and I think that's something that we should, I think the fine tuning of the voice, that's the different story, right? Yeah, absolutely, we can fine tune down to like certain dialects, even for different languages, and even if we need to make it sound, very specific down to a particular person's voice. But I think this is where we should just share that. I think that the voice layers, that's just the voice, right? That's the text to speech layer. There's companies out there that do this. Unless you're out there building a voice layer, pretty much for all intents and purposes, they can sound the same. Now, do they sound the same in the way they can actually speak and through latency and the way they can actually conversate? No, that's different, right? Because the voice is just the voice off, the shelf, right? It's the brains behind the voice that makes the difference, right? Now, of course, we're innovating on, building very specific types of voice models, which that would be totally different, and that's going to be completely game changing. But for all intents and purposes, yeah, the voices can be modified. But one of the things I think that you said that's really
customers complain. He knows that someone says your agent said this or your agent said that. Oh, that's another beauty of this system is every single word is documented in the back end of the system. So if a customer says you said this and the agent says, no, I got it right here in print format. Here's every conversation you had, and this is what it said.
Yep.
So we didn't say we could do this. We said we could do that, right?
Yep.
They don't have that record unless they're listening to an old phone recording, but they don't. They don't spend the time. They don't realize that there's a lot of problems that they've never uncovered. They just know they don't have the productivity that they're looking for. And I think this is what it comes down to is as soon as those first 30 days are over and they've seen how many more appointments are on the books based on the number of calls that were answered compared to the month before. And then they start looking at their ROs or their sales compared to the month before. And aha moment comes up, right? It's like, you know what? That little thing that the Ford said, the agent said it was a Ford F-150 instead of an
Yep.
F-150 isn't so bad, is it? Right? Is that
No,
going to
no,
cause somebody to walk away? No. Someone's going to
no.
recognize and face it. They don't even know that it's an agent half the time when they're talking, and they definitely don't know when they're conversing via text, right? When they're
Right.
the language is so much more perfect than your gosh, I hate to say this, but the millennials and the younger kids who grew up with two thumbs instead of Mavis Beacon teaches typing, right?
Right.
They go fast. They don't ever use punctuation. They don't use capital letters, right? It looks horrible. You got run-on
Yes.
sentences, you got things that happen, and that's your people. You don't ever complain about that. I've never heard people talking about that, but they might mention something about the agent saying something a little off, right? Well, the agent's going to
Yeah.
learn right away. But the agent in a script format, in a text and chat format, right, is perfect. There is
Yep.
punctuation, there is perfect English, there is a recognition of language. There is the ability to that if that customer all of a sudden starts typing in Spanish, the agent starts typing back in Spanish. It's just amazing, right?
Yeah.
Of
Yeah.
of what it can pick up, but how good it really is.
Yeah.
And I think that is what sets it apart.
Yep.
Um,
Yeah. And I think that's right. And I think that we have to let them get to that point, right? We have to, and I think as leaders in this industry, whether that's OEMs, whether that's dealers that have seen success with it, or us, you, me, we have got to help the market understand that we got to let them get to that point, and then we have to dispel some of these fears. But we also have to remember, and I think it's important for us to just talk about it for a second. I think we have to remember how all of this is impacting the dealer, right? Because you can't just say, "Oh man, it's great, it's going to do this, it's going to help you, it's going to do all these things," because there's all these other power dynamics. I'm saying that I feel are happening, right? And I just want to talk about a couple of them, and I'd love to get your thoughts on it. But from a BDC staff, right? The way that it's been today is if I'm a BDC person, the first thing that comes to mind is job security fears. BDC reps here at AI agent, that's synonymous with them being replaced, right? Because remember, they live on call volume metrics. AI takes the call, what's left for them? Then there's
their
this,
pay
like I
plan,
said,
right?
right, right, their pay plan.
So
Well, and that's the thing too, right? This is where we have to help, really build this as so it doesn't become a double-edged sword. But compensation alignment matters. So we work to train our dealers to say, hey, this is where the power dynamic really shifts. Because BDC pay plans today are usually paid on appointments set or appointments shown, right? Their livelihood depend on it, and being the gatekeeper of that lead flow. AI breaks that model. AI completely breaks and shatters that model, right? So if AI is setting the appointments automatically, who gets credit? If AI nurtures the client services, is that BDC production? Is that AI production? So dealers need to think about this, and it's important, right? It's great to bring in the AI and bring in the success, and I encourage that because obviously it's good for us, and it's going to be great for them. But I really would encourage dealers that are listening to this to think about how can I align my teams to be in more harmony with my BDC because it's not about replacing.
a vast improvement over what's been out there for the last few years.
That's fair. Yeah, no, it is. Thank you, Ron.